For 10 long years, everyone thought the billionaire's son was broken. Every day, the boy sat at a cold glass window, pointing his shaking finger at the dark woods. He whispered the same 3 words until his voice was gone, but his father just walked past him. The nannies laughed at him. The doctor said his brain was just empty. They treated him like a piece of furniture that couldn't feel pain. But then, a new maid walked in. She didn't look away. She followed his finger to the shadows where the trees grow thick. And what she found, staring back at her from the dirt, it wasn't a ghost. It was a secret so big it would rip the billionaire's world apart. It was a truth that had been shivering in the dark for 10 years, waiting for one person to finally care. What was hidden in those woods didn't just change their lives, it shattered everything they thought they knew about their own family. The Vance house was not a home. It was a giant box made of cold stone and glass in a place called Greenwich, Connecticut. Inside that house, there was no laughing. There was no music. There was only the sound of clocks ticking and the soft footsteps of workers who were paid to be quiet. Julian Vance was the man who owned the house. He was a billionaire. He had more money than a person could count in a lifetime. He owned buildings, ships, and companies. But if you looked into Julian's eyes, you would see a man who was empty. He walked through his hallways like a ghost. 10 years ago, his wife died on the day their son was born. Since that day, Julian had shut his heart tight. He did not want to feel love because love felt like pain. He worked from the time the sun came up until the moon was high, just so he didn't have to think about his broken family. Then there was Leo. Leo was Julian's 10-year-old son. Leo was a small, thin boy with hair the color of sand and eyes that always looked like they were searching for something far away. Leo had autism. To the doctors, this meant Leo's brain worked differently. To the nannies and the maids, it meant Leo was broken. He did not play with trucks. He did not run or shout. Every single day, from morning until night, Leo sat on a small wooden chair by the big glass window in the hallway. He stared out at the backyard garden. The garden was messy and overgrown because Julian couldn't bear to look at the flowers his wife once loved. Leo would lift his small, shaking finger and point at a dark corner of the yard where the trees were thick. "Mama's place. There," Leo would whisper. He said it over and over. "Mama's place. There." The nannies would walk past him and roll their eyes. "He's just talking nonsense again," they would say. They would put his food on a tray, leave it near him, and walk away to talk on their phones. They didn't see the way Leo's hand trembled. They didn't see the tears that stayed trapped in his eyes. Julian was the worst of all. When he walked past the window, he didn't even look at his son. He was afraid that if he looked at Leo, he would see his dead wife's face. He told himself, "The boy has doctors. The boy has food. The boy is safe. That is enough." But it wasn't enough. Leo was drowning in silence, and no one was reaching out to pull him up. One Monday morning, a new girl named Elena arrived at the back door. She was young and wore a plain brown coat. She came from a poor town in Ohio where people knew what it felt like to be hungry and lonely. She needed this job to send money back to her mother. The head maid, a mean woman with a tight bun, showed Elena the cleaning supplies. "Don't speak to the boss," the woman warned. "And don't worry about the boy. He stays by the window. He's not right in the head. Just clean around him." Elena nodded, but when she walked down the long hallway and saw Leo, she stopped. She didn't see a broken boy. She saw a child who looked like he was waiting for a miracle. She watched him point his finger. She heard his tiny voice, "Mama's place. There." Elena felt a sharp tug in her chest. She didn't start cleaning. She didn't look at her phone. She moved slowly, like she was approaching a bird that might fly away. She sat on the floor near Leo's chair. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there so he wouldn't be alone. After a long time, Leo turned his head. It was the first time he had looked at anyone in months. His eyes were wide and full of a secret. "Do you see it?" Leo asked, his voice cracking. Elena looked out the window. All she saw were dead leaves and tall, scary weeds. "I don't see it yet, Leo," she said softly. "But I am looking. Tell me what is there." Leo's breath got fast. He pointed harder, his nail scratching the glass. "She is waiting. In the green. Mama's place. She is cold." Elena felt a chill go down her back. The way Leo said "cold" didn't sound like a memory. It sounded like he was talking about someone who was outside right now. She looked at the dark woods at the edge of the yard. The wind moved the branches, and for a second, just a tiny second, Elena thought she saw a flash of white cloth moving behind a tree. She blinked, and it was gone. That night, Julian came home late. The house was dark. He saw Elena standing by the window, looking out into the night. "Why aren't you cleaning?" Julian asked, his voice loud and mean. Elena turned around. She wasn't scared of his money. "Sir," she said, "your son has been pointing at those trees for hours. He says someone is out there. He says she is cold." Julian's face went white. He felt a mix of anger and fear. "My wife is dead, girl. He is a sick child. Do your job and stop listening to stories. If you fill his head with nonsense, you will be fired by morning." Julian stormed off to his office and slammed the door. But inside, his hands were shaking. He poured a drink, but he couldn't stop thinking about the word cold. Meanwhile, upstairs, Elena couldn't sleep. She stayed in her small room, looking out her own window. The moon was bright. She looked back at the spot Leo had pointed to. Suddenly, she saw it again. A small shadow moved out from behind the bushes. It wasn't a ghost, it was a person. A very small person. The shadow stood still, looking up at the house straight at the window where Leo sat every day. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. She realized that Leo wasn't crazy. He wasn't seeing things. There was a secret living in the woods of this billionaire's estate. A secret that had been watching them for a long, long time. She knew she had to go out there. She knew she had to see for herself. But she also knew that if Julian caught her, she would lose everything. And more importantly, she felt that whatever was in those woods was the key to the hole in Leo's heart. She grabbed a flashlight and a warm blanket. She crept down the stairs, making sure the floorboards didn't creak. She reached the back door and turned the handle. The cold night air hit her face. She stepped out into the dark, walking toward the place Leo called Mama's place. Every step felt like a mile. The trees looked like giant hands reaching for her. As she got closer to the thick bushes, she heard a sound. It wasn't the wind. It was a soft, wet sound, like someone crying. Elena stopped. She held her breath. She pulled the blanket tight. "Hello?" she whispered. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped. The woods went dead silent. Elena pointed her flashlight toward the old, broken swing set Leo had been pointing at. The light hit a pair of eyes. Two small, brown eyes, exactly like Leo's, staring back at her from the dirt. Elena stood frozen in the dark yard. The cold air felt like needles on her skin. She held the flashlight with both hands. The light was shaking because her arms were trembling. The two eyes she saw in the bushes did not move. They were wide, and they looked very, very scared. Elena took a slow step forward. Her shoes made a crunching sound on the dead leaves. The person in the bushes let out a tiny gasp, like a trapped animal. Elena lowered the light so she wouldn't blind the child, because she could tell now it was a child. "It is okay," Elena whispered. Her voice was soft and kind. "I am not going to hurt you. I have a warm blanket. Are you cold?" Slowly, the branches moved. A small girl crawled out from the dirt. Elena felt her breath leave her body. The girl was very thin. Her skin was covered in streaks of mud, and her dress was nothing but rags. But it was her face that made Elena's heart stop. The girl looked exactly like Leo. She had the same nose, the same shape of the chin, and those same deep brown eyes. The girl looked at the blanket in Elena's hands. She reached out a small, dirty hand, but then she heard a dog bark far away, and she jumped back into the shadows. Before Elena could say another word, the girl turned and ran into the deep woods. She was fast, like she had lived in the trees her whole life. "Wait!" Elena called out, but the girl was gone. Elena stood there for a long time. Her mind was spinning. How could this be? Julian said his wife died and only one baby lived. But that girl was not a stranger. She was a twin. She was the other half of Leo. Elena looked up at the big house. The lights in Julian's office were still on. He was sitting in there with his money and his papers, while his own daughter was eating grass and sleeping in the dirt. The next morning, Elena went to Leo's window. He was already there, sitting in his chair, pointing. When he saw Elena, he didn't look sad like before. He looked like he was waiting for news. Elena knelt down so her face was close to his. "I saw her, Leo," she whispered. Leo's whole body went still. A small, beautiful smile touched his lips. "Mana," he said. "Is that her name?" Elena asked. Leo nodded. "Mana. She stays by the swings. She cries for mommy. I tell her I am here, but the glass is too thick. She can't hear me through the glass." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. This poor boy had been trying to tell the world his sister was alive for years, and everyone just called him sick. She looked at the head maid walking by and quickly stood up to start dusting. She had to be careful. If the staff found out, they might call the police or hurt the girl. She had to find a way to bring the girl in. But she needed Julian to see the truth first. Later that day, Elena was cleaning Julian's office. He was on the phone, shouting about a business deal. He looked tired, and his face was gray. When he hung up, he saw Elena staring at a photo of his late wife on the desk. "I told you to work, not to look at my things," Julian snapped. Elena took a deep breath. She knew she might get fired, but she couldn't stay quiet. "Sir, I went to the garden last night. I saw a child. She looks just like Leo. She was wearing rags, and she was hungry." Julian stood up so fast his chair fell over. His face turned a deep, angry red. "Enough," he yelled. "I am tired of this trick. My daughter died 10 years ago, the doctors told me. The papers say it. You are trying to mess with my head because you want more money." "I don't want your money, Julian," Elena said, using his real name for the first time. "I want you to look out the window. Just once. Look at your son. He isn't pointing at nothing. He is pointing at his sister." Julian walked over to her. His shadow was big and scary. "If you say this one more time, I will throw you out in the street. Do you understand me? Go back to the kitchen." Elena left the room. Her heart was heavy like a stone. She realized Julian was not just mean, he was terrified. He was so afraid of being hurt again that he shut his eyes to the world. But Elena would not give up. She went to the kitchen and took some bread, a piece of chicken, and a bottle of water. She hid them in her apron. When the sun started to go down, she went to the window and took Leo's hand. "Leo," she said, "we are going to go outside. We are going to find her together." Leo's eyes went wide. He had not been outside in a very long time. He was scared of the loud world, but he looked at Elena and he trusted her. He stood up from his chair. His legs were a bit shaky. They walked down the hall, past the sleeping guards, and out the back door. The garden felt different with Leo there. He didn't hesitate. He led Elena straight to the old, rusted swing set. The swings were covered in dry vines. They looked like skeletons in the moonlight. Leo sat on one of the seats. It made a loud, rusty creak sound. "Mana!" Leo called out. It wasn't a whisper this time. It was a strong, loud call. "Mana, come! Elena has bread." For a minute, there was only the sound of the wind. Then, the bushes near the fence began to shake. The little girl stepped out. She looked at Leo, and then she looked at Elena. She saw the bread in Elena's hand. She walked closer. Her feet were bare and covered in cuts. When she got to the swings, she didn't grab the food first. She went to Leo. She touched his face with her dirty fingers. Leo reached out and touched her hair. They didn't say words. They just sat there. Two children who had been separated by a lie, finally touching each other. Elena sat on the grass and opened the water bottle. "Eat, little one," she said. The girl grabbed the bread and ate it so fast she started to cough. Elena patted her back gently. As she did, she noticed something on the girl's wrist. It was a small, plastic hospital band. It was old, yellow, and dirty, but it was still there. Elena pulled her flashlight out and shined it on the band. Her heart skipped a beat. It had a date on it, the same date Leo was born. And it had a name, Baby Girl Vance. "Oh my God," Elena whispered. Just then, a bright light hit them from the back porch. "Who is out there?" a voice boomed. It was Julian. He was standing on the porch with a flashlight of his own. The little girl screamed. She was terrified of the man's loud voice. She tried to run, but she tripped over a tree root and fell. "Julian, stop!" Elena shouted. Julian ran down the stairs, his boots thumping on the grass. He reached them and shined his light down at the girl on the ground. He saw her face. He saw the hospital band on her wrist. The flashlight fell from Julian's hand and landed in the grass. He fell to his knees, the air leaving his lungs in a loud sob. "No," he gasped. "No, it can't be." The little girl crawled behind Elena, shaking with fear. Leo stood up from the swing and walked over to his father. He put his small hand on Julian's shoulder. "Daddy," Leo said. His voice was very calm. "I told you." Mana was cold. Julian looked at the girl, then at Leo, and then at the dark woods. He realized that for 10 years, he had been living a lie, while his own flesh and blood was living like a ghost in his backyard. But the mystery was not over. As Julian reached out to touch the girl, a car engine started up in the secret alleyway behind the garden fence. Someone had been watching them. Someone was trying to get away. The sound of the car engine was loud. It cut through the quiet night like a knife. Julian looked up from the dirt. His face was wet with tears, but his eyes were now full of a new kind of fire. He looked at the little girl, his daughter, who was hiding behind Elena. She was shaking so hard that her teeth were making a clicking sound. "Stay with them, Elena," Julian shouted. He stood up and ran toward the back fence. He did not care about his expensive suit or his polished shoes. He jumped over the low stone wall and disappeared into the shadows where the car was hidden. Elena pulled both children close to her. She wrapped the big, warm blanket around the little girl and Leo at the same time. They sat together on the grass under the old swings. The girl was tensed up, ready to bolt, but Leo held her hand tight. "It is okay, Mana," Leo whispered. "The loud man is just Daddy. He is sad, but he is not mean." The girl looked at Leo. She seemed to understand his voice, even if she did not know the words. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Elena watched them and felt a pain in her heart. These two should have been playing in a nursery together for the last 10 years, not meeting like strangers in the dark. A few minutes later, Julian came back. He was breathing hard, and his shirt was torn. He was holding something in his hand. It was a small, black wallet that the person in the car had dropped when they sped away. Julian walked over to the children and knelt down. He was trying to keep his voice soft, but his breath was still coming in fast gasps. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, and more tears fell down his cheeks. "I am so sorry," Julian whispered to the girl. "I didn't know. They told me you were gone." The girl didn't answer. She just stared at him with those big, brown eyes. Julian opened the black wallet. He pulled out a small ID card. When he saw the face on the card, he let out a growl of anger. "It was the nurse," Julian said. His voice was shaking. "The man who worked at the hospital. He has been living in a small house just past my property line for years. He was the one watching us." Elena looked at the ID. "Why would he do this, Julian? Why keep a child in the woods?" Julian looked at the girl's thin arms and the way she flinched at every sound. "Money," he said. His voice was bitter. "He probably stole her to sell her, but something went wrong. Maybe she was too hard to handle, or maybe he got scared. He kept her hidden out there like a secret so he wouldn't go to jail. He probably fed her scraps just to keep her alive." The thought of it made Elena want to scream. She looked at the little girl, who was now shivering under the blanket. "We need to get her inside, Julian. She needs a doctor. She needs to be warm." Julian nodded quickly. He reached out his arms to pick the girl up. At first, she backed away. Her eyes went wide with fear. But Leo took her hand and pulled it toward Julian. "Go, Mana," Leo said. "Safe now." The girl let Julian lift her. She was so light, it was like she was made of nothing but feathers and bone. Julian held her against his chest, tucking her head under his chin. He felt her small heart beating fast, like a bird's wing. He walked toward the big house, and for the first time in 10 years, he didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a father. They went inside through the back door. The house was still quiet, but the air felt different. Julian took them to the large living room. He sat the girl down on the soft, velvet sofa. It was the most expensive furniture in the house, but he didn't care when her muddy legs touched the fabric. "Elena, call the private doctor," Julian ordered. "Tell him to come now. Tell him if he tells anyone, I will ruin him. But tell him a child's life is on the line." While Elena went to the phone, Julian sat on the floor at the girl's feet. Leo sat next to her, never letting go of her hand. The girl looked around the room, at the gold lamps and the high ceilings. She looked confused, like she had been brought to another planet. Elena came back with a bowl of warm soup and some soft bread. She sat next to the girl and held a spoon up to her mouth. "Try this, sweetie. It is warm. It will make your tummy feel better." The girl took a sip. Her eyes lit up. She started to eat, more slowly this time, because Elena was there to calm her. As the girl ate, Julian watched her. He saw the way she looked at Leo. They didn't need to speak. They had a way of communicating with just their eyes. It was a twin bond that even 10 years of darkness could not break. The doctor arrived an hour later. He was an old man who had worked for Julian for a long time. When he saw the girl, he gasped and dropped his bag. "Julian," the doctor whispered. "Who is this? She looks like—" "She is my daughter," Julian said. His voice was like iron. "Check her. Tell me she is going to be okay." The doctor spent a long time looking at the girl. He checked her heart, her lungs, and the old scars on her feet. The girl was brave. She stayed still because Leo was right there next to her. "She is very weak," the doctor said finally. "She has not had good food for a long time. She has lived in the cold. But she is strong. She is a fighter, Julian, just like her mother was." Julian put his head in his hands. He felt a mountain of guilt. He had been so busy being sad about the past that he had missed the miracle happening in his own backyard. While the doctor was talking, Elena noticed something. She saw a shadow move past the living room window. She stood up and walked to the glass. Outside, in the driveway, she saw a man standing near a tree. He was wearing a white nurse's jacket, and he was holding a heavy metal pipe. He wasn't running away anymore. He was coming for the girl. He wanted to take his secret back. Elena turned around. Her face was pale. "Julian," she whispered. "He is here. The man from the woods. He is outside." Julian stood up. He didn't look scared. He looked like a man who was done being a victim. He looked at Elena, and then at his 2 children on the sofa. "Elena, take the kids to the safe room in the basement," Julian said. His voice was low and dangerous. "Lock the door. Do not come out until I say so." "But Julian, he has a weapon," Elena said. Her voice was trembling. Julian picked up a heavy fire poker from the fireplace. "He took 10 years from me, Elena. He is not taking another second. Go, now." Elena grabbed Leo and the girl. They ran toward the basement stairs. As they went down into the dark, Elena heard the sound of glass breaking upstairs. The man was inside the house. The basement was cold and quiet. Elena pushed the children into the small room with the thick steel door. She locked it and held them close. They sat in the dark, listening. They heard a loud crash. Then they heard shouting. They heard Julian's voice, full of rage, and another man's voice, high and panicky. There was a loud bang, and then total silence. Leo pulled the blanket over his and Mana's head. They sat there in the dark, 3 people waiting to see if their new life was over before it even began. The silence lasted for what felt like forever. Then, they heard footsteps coming down the wooden stairs. Thump, thump, thump. The footsteps stopped right outside the steel door. Someone turned the handle. Chapter 4. A new light in the window. The handle of the steel door turned slowly, and the sound of the metal clicking was very loud in the small, dark room. Elena held the children so tight her knuckles were white. She held her breath, waiting for the door to swing open. The door creaked, and a sliver of light from the hallway hit the floor. A man stood there. Elena raised her hands to protect the children, but then she saw the face. It was Julian. His face was bruised, and there was a cut on his forehead, but he was standing tall. He looked at Elena and the 2 children, and his eyes were soft. "It is over," Julian said. His voice was thick and tired. "The police are here. They caught him near the gate. He will never come near this house again. He will spend the rest of his life in a cell." Elena let out a long breath she didn't know she was holding. She looked down at the little girl, who was still hiding her face in Leo's shirt. "Is he really gone, Julian?" "Yes," Julian said, stepping into the room. He sat on the floor with them, ignoring the dust. He confessed everything to the police because he was scared. He had a debt to pay years ago, and he thought he could sell a billionaire's baby to a family far away. But when he saw she was like Leo, he got scared they would find out. He hid her in that old shack in the woods, feeding her just enough to keep his secret hidden. Julian reached out and gently touched the girl's hair. She didn't flinch this time. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw a father instead of a stranger. "We are going to make it right," Julian whispered. "Everything she lost, we are going to give it back." The next few months were not easy, but they were full of wonder. The big, cold house in Greenwich, Connecticut, began to change. Julian hired people to fix the garden, but he told them to leave the old swing set exactly where it was. He had it cleaned and painted white, because that was the place where his family found each other again. The little girl was given the name Lily. It was the name Julian's wife had always wanted for a daughter. In the beginning, Lily was very quiet. She did not know how to use a fork, and she was scared of the big, soft beds. She would try to sleep on the floor under the window. But Elena stayed with her every night. Elena would sit on the floor and tell her stories about the stars and the woods until Lily fell asleep. Leo was the one who helped the most. He was like a bridge for his sister. When Lily was scared of the vacuum cleaner, Leo would hold her hand and show her how to turn it off. When she didn't want to eat her vegetables, Leo would make a funny face until she laughed. The biggest change, though, was in Leo himself. He didn't sit at the window and point anymore. He didn't need to. The thing he was pointing at was finally inside the house with him. He started to speak more. Not just whispers, but real sentences. One sunny afternoon, Julian was sitting on the back porch. He wasn't looking at a computer or talking on a phone. He was watching Leo and Lily run through the grass. They were playing a game of tag, their laughter ringing out through the trees. Elena came out with 2 glasses of cold lemonade. She sat next to Julian. Over the months, the two of them had become very close. They were not just a boss and a maid anymore. They were partners. Julian looked at her with a look of deep respect. "You saved us, Elena," Julian said. "If you hadn't stopped to listen to a boy everyone else ignored, I would still be a ghost in this house." Elena smiled, looking at the children. "I didn't do much, Julian. I just paid attention. People think you need money or big words to help someone, but sometimes you just need to stand still and look where they are pointing." Julian took her hand. "I want you to stay, not as a worker. I want you to help me run the new foundation. We are going to build a place for kids like Leo and Lily. A place where no child is ever invisible." Elena felt a warm glow in her chest. "I would like that very much." As the sun began to set, the sky turned a beautiful shade of orange and pink. Leo and Lily ran over to the white swings. They sat side by side, their legs moving in the same rhythm. "Mama's place," Leo said, looking at the woods. But he wasn't sad. Lily looked at the house, at the big window where Leo used to sit all alone. She pointed at the light glowing inside the room. "Home," Lily said. It was her very first word. Julian and Elena stood up and walked down into the grass to join them. The billionaire, who had everything but was empty, and the maid who had nothing but was full of love, were finally a family. The silence of the Vance house was gone forever. It was replaced by the sound of swinging, the sound of stories, and the most important sound of all, the sound of a father telling his children he loved them. The boy at the window was no longer waiting. He was finally home. Dear viewers, this story is more than just a tale of a rich man and a secret in the woods. It is a reminder that the loudest cries for help often come from those who cannot speak at all. It shows us that a little bit of kindness and a moment of attention can mend a heart that has been broken for years. Leo was never lost. He was just waiting for someone to finally see him. We want to hear from you now. Please comment below and tell us where you are watching from. We love to see how far these stories travel. Also, share with us what you learned from this story today. Did it remind you to be more patient? Did it touch your heart? Your words mean so much to us. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with someone who needs to feel a little hope today. And if you want to see more stories like this, simply comment "more stories" below. By doing that, you will be the very first to get our next emotional journey. Thank you for staying until the end. And remember, always take a moment to look where others are pointing. Until next time.